What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about a specific section of attachments in the Vanguard Beta, and this is the ammo type section. And the reason I wanted to focus on this in particular is, right up front, when I found out that we have the ability to have 10 attachments on our weapon at any given time with no trade-off for those 10 attachments, I was concerned, and I still do have a little bit of concern, but a lot of my concerns have been alleviated after seeing most of the attachment types and how they all seem to have proper trade-offs. So at the end of the day, if we look at our standard attachments like muzzle attachments, grip attachments, stock attachments and stuff, no matter what direction you take it, there's always going to be a certain trade-off to selecting each one of those attachments, and at the end of the day, they'll end up all sort of balancing out and canceling out. So you will be able to design a setup and fine-tune it in a certain way, but there's always going to be an inherent downside to each choice that you make. This is until we get to the ammo types. At least in my opinion, some of the ammo types look like they could use a little bit of work and maybe some more trade-offs to them, because many of them will have a very significant impact on the power or the potential or the defined playstyle of a weapon, and as far as we can tell in the menus at least, only one of them has downsides. Now, it is worth noting this is from a beta build of the game, and there's some areas of the menus that are clearly unfinished, so I could be wrong on this. Maybe there are actual downsides built in and they just haven't made it into the menus yet, or maybe they're not done balancing these completely and we will have some downsides at launch. But I still wanted to go through each of these ammo types and share my opinion on them. So let's start off with Subsonic. With Subsonic, we get no minimap ping when we fire our weapon. Also, when you kill enemy players, there will be no skull visible for their teammates showing where they died. And then finally, it says firing visibility to enemies. I am almost certain this means there is no tracer effect with the rounds that you fire, so you can't actually see the bullets flying through the air, and therefore use that information to try and pinpoint where that person is. So obviously this is designed for that more stealthy playstyle. And the big thing that I was fully expecting to see as a downside to subsonic ammunition was a reduction to bullet velocity, because that's literally what subsonic ammunition is all about, is reducing that bullet velocity below the speed of sound so there's no sonic boom, which makes them much quieter. Now, I would hope that they don't take it too seriously and go too realistic with this and drop that bullet velocity actually below the speed of sound, because then the hit detection would be completely awful with this. But I was expecting at least some reduction to bullet velocity while using subsonic ammunition, and I do feel like that trade-off should exist. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Fmj Rounds, and with this, we get increased bullet penetration, which is to be expected. This is exactly what you would expect out of Fmj Rounds. And honestly, when it comes to this one, I don't think we need a built-in downside because it's a situational attachment. Unlike Subsonic, which is working every time you pull the trigger on your gun, no matter what you're shooting at, or some of the other ones that are going to be directly helping you in every single gunfight you get into, Fmj rounds are literally only beneficial if you're shooting through something. In a standard face-to-face gunfight, where there's no cover involved, Fmj rounds are doing literally nothing for you, and as a result, I think it's totally fair to not have a built-in downside to using Fmj rounds. The downside is the fact that they are highly situational. Next up, let's talk about frangible, and this is one of the biggest ones that I have a fairly large issue with. With this, you significantly increase the amount of flinch that you're dealing to enemy players, so you cause them to flinch more when you shoot them. Also, any damage you deal with this will delay enemy healing time, so it'll take them longer to heal up, and when you hit their legs, it will slow their movement, and it doesn't mention it here, but it also has a fairly noticeable stun effect on the target. And this is what that stun effect looks like. It's really jarring and hard to deal with. It's the same as frangible disabling as a perk in Modern Warfare. However, with those other effects that I mentioned, this is frangible disabling on super steroids. And the really big thing I strongly dislike about this ammo type is this isn't directly buffing you and your ability to kill your target. Instead, it's directly nerfing the enemy player when they're in a gunfight with you, which is just really frustrating to be on the receiving end of. I'm totally fine if somebody selects attachments that boost their damage range or their recoil, basically boost their ability to kill me, but I'm really not a fan of attachments that allow them to directly nerf me when I'm fighting against them. It's not a good feeling at all when you run into somebody using this, and it also creates very inconsistent gunfights. From gunfight to gunfight, your flinch is going to vary massively depending on whether or not the enemy is using this frangible ammo type. And I think I find the added flinch the most frustrating part about this, because I really like what they did with Modern Warfare. They finally brought consistency to flinch, where the flinch that you received was directly dictated by the weapon that you chose to be in your hand at that given time. So like assault rifles and SMGs and LMGs, you didn't have a whole lot of flinch when you were using those in Modern Warfare, but if you used a sniper rifle or a marksman rifle, you would receive more flinch when shot. And that was a trade-off and a balancing factor to using those different guns. Now we have an attachment that allows the enemy player to control how much flinch you are going to be having. And at its core, I just disagree with having an attachment that does something like that. I could live with the delaying enemy healing or hitting their legs has that stun effect and you have that frangible effect. I really don't like the fact that this impacts flinch though. Additionally, as far as we can tell based on the menus here, there are no downsides to using frangible ammunition. So in my opinion at least, this is clearly an unbalanced ammo type and something should be done. I think the perfect downside that they could build into this ammo type that would actually follow suit with real life themes is make it essentially the reverse of the Fmj rounds. So make it so your damage is significantly reduced if you're shooting through something, or make it so you can't even penetrate certain pieces of cover that you would otherwise be able to penetrate without using this ammo type. This is how frangible rounds work in real life. The whole purpose of them is they break up when they hit their target in order to inflict more damage to soft tissue. But in doing so in real life, you lose a lot of your penetration power. Additionally, on top of this, when it comes to balancing, I think it should be less of a flinch increase if they insist on keeping a flinch increase with that. I would definitely like to see this toned down because this has a significant impact on gunfights. And I'm worried this will end up being a crutch ammo type that's just going to lead to a lot of frustration. But finally, moving on, frangible is the one I wanted to talk about the most. Let's get into armor piercing. This allows you to deal more damage to vehicles as well as kill streaks. Just like with FMJ, I don't think this needs a downside because its downside is the fact that it's extremely situational. Although one thing I would love to add to either this or Fmj rounds is make it so it completely counters the armor field upgrade. Make it so it will instantly break that armor and you won't lose any damage whatsoever. I think that would also make it so people are less annoyed with that field upgrade in general. After that, let's get into Incendiary, and this is the only ammo type that has displayed downsides to it. And as a result, I'm actually fine with it in its current state. I was a bit concerned about it in the alpha, in the Champion Hill alpha, because everybody was just getting it because it was automatic. Like, you couldn't choose exactly which attachments you wanted. You just leveled it up, and that happened to be one of the attachments you'd get. But now knowing that it harms your bullet velocity as well as your damage range, I'm no longer really concerned about this attachment. Sure, it might lead to a few frustrating kill trades here or there, but at least I know that there is a trade-off to choosing that. After that, let's get into Lengthened, and with this one, it just noticeably increases your bullet velocity. And this is another one of those ammo types where I don't necessarily think it needs a downside as well. And the reason behind this is even though it is applying every single time you shoot a bullet, you're going to get that faster bullet velocity. At least when it comes to regular multiplayer, this is only really going to have a noticeable impact on gunfights for really long-range situations. In the vast majority of gunfights that you'd experience in a multiplayer environment at least, you'll never notice the difference with this increased bullet velocity. It only applies to super long-range fights. And because of this, I also consider this to be quite a situational attachment, and therefore it doesn't need any severe downsides to it. But finally, let's move into Hollow Point, which I actually discovered there's two different versions of Hollow Point depending on the weapon type that you're using. But with most guns, as far as I could tell, Hollow Point will remove the damage penalty when hitting limbs. Now, we don't know exactly what limb damages look like in this game because we have access to a limited build and we can't do any custom match testing or anything, but presumably for at least many of the guns in the game, you're going to be dealing less damage to the limbs compared to the torso or the upper torso. So having this on will make it so you deal the same damage everywhere to the body, which will significantly increase your consistency with many of the guns in the game. And when it comes to this, I feel this is the type of thing that's actually going to be helping in a lot of gunfights. It's not a highly situational thing. This is something that will actually apply to a lot of the gunfights you get into. And as a result, this is another one of those ammo types that I do feel should have some built-in downside to it. I don't think it needs to be severe. I'm thinking maybe a range reduction. I think that's a fair trade-off. You get better consistency when it comes to hitting anywhere in the body, but you have to make sure you're managing your ranges a little bit more effectively. I think that's completely fair and balanced. I think it would still be a very popular choice. People would really enjoy using it, especially on certain weapons once we start seeing different damage profiles and how much of an impact limb shots would have. But yeah, this is just another one of those attachments where I feel like something needs to be keeping it in check, otherwise it could become far too powerful and maybe even a crutch. As for the other version of Hollow Point, I noticed this on the sniper rifles. With this one, instead of changing the body multipliers, which would be way too powerful and crutch on sniper rifles especially, instead what you get is increased flinch dealt. And just like with Frangible, I'm not the biggest fan of having the ability to impact how much flinch the enemy is receiving, but I am at least much more open to this on sniper rifles. Since it is a one-shot thing, it's not like you're going to be getting consistent hit after hit that's causing your flinch to stack. It's a one-shot sort of a thing that will potentially throw them way off target. And honestly, I'm totally fine with this as it is right now. If you end up getting a hit marker and not a kill with your one-shot kill sniper rifle, this will just buy you a little bit of extra time to maybe get a round rechambered so you can get a second shot off. I would say you're still probably going to lose that gunfight, but this is just one of those slight modifiers that may help you out in some gunfights. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the ammo types that we've seen so far in the Vanguard Beta and how I'd like to see some of them adjusted. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about the ammo types? Do you think they're balanced just fine as is? Or do you like some of the suggestions I've offered here to build in some downsides to at least a few of them? Just let me know those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.